The massacre at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh by a white supremacist terrorist has deepened the already bitterly divided views in the American Jewish community about President Trump. The debate now: has the president fostered an atmosphere that allows hate and anti-Semitism to thrive? To discuss this issue, I am joined by founder of the World Values Network, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, and columnist at The Forward, Elad Noherai. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It's very good to see you both. Rabbi, I want to start with you. Let's get straight to it. Has the president's rhetoric emboldened white supremacists like Robert Bowers, the man who perpetrated this murder?
Well, we have to make sure that in the Jewish community that we are not infected by extremist rhetoric and by brain-dead punditry. When the president is right about something, we must applaud him. For example, his fighting for Israel at the UN, removing us from the Iran nuclear agreement, and especially moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Where he is wrong, as in Charlottesville, where he did not sufficiently condemn the white supremacists or even said there could be good people on the neo-Nazi side. There are no good people among neo-Nazis. They are monsters. They are abominable human beings. At that moment, we have to criticize the president. I find partisanship in the Jewish community where we actually trample on our own values, where we cannot give credit where it is due or show hakarat tov, basic gratitude, or where we are such partisans where we refuse to criticize because we're too attached to a party. Values transcends party. Now, this president has done more than most of his predecessors to legitimize the state of Israel and to stand with Israel publicly. But he has not yet given the primetime address utterly condemning and repudiating the support of white supremacists and nationalists who are a new terror group in the United States, meaning they had turned to violence decades ago. They did again, even under President Obama, in June of 2015 with the massacre of 9 innocent African Americans at a South Carolina church, but now they're becoming even more violent.
All right, I want to get Elad into this. I want to get your reaction to what the rabbi just said. And is it also what I think maybe on the left are saying that isn't it far-fetched to say that Trump is to blame, that these people died because of him?
No, I think that would be quite wrong to say that. I actually think that the over-focus on Trump is problematic, both on the left and on the right. The reason for that is not because Trump does not bear responsibility for stoking the flames of extremism, but because this is a much larger and much more widespread problem than most people are willing to admit. So it's interesting because I actually agree with Rabbi Boteach that we should be looking at extremist language. We should be trying to examine it where it exists, try to call it out where it exists. And the truth is, it has existed on Fox News. The very same conspiracy theory that brought a man into a synagogue to kill 11 people, and that also, by the way, led to the Kroger shooting, the same group of people led to the Kroger shooting. All of these things were stoked by Fox News. For example, the George Soros conspiracy that he is funding the caravan was a huge part of the reason that this happened. I would never in a million years say anyone is responsible or to blame for a terrorist attack besides the terrorist, but we do need to be able to talk about how rhetoric gets shared, and just like we do that with the radical Islamist world, we need to do that with the white nationalist world and with the mainstream right, which is unfortunately becoming more and more radicalized.
But Rabbi, do you see any connection whatsoever to the spike in anti-Semitism to the Trump era that we are living in today?
Well, let me first respond to Elad. With all due respect, I think all of us have to be the man in the mirror, looking at ourselves, including myself, about how we may have contributed in any way. Elad, I saw that you tweeted just a day or two ago that even the support for Israel that evangelical Christians give is a form of anti-Semitism. I mean, seriously? You also wrote that the right created this murder, actually created him. Now you're saying Fox News created him. I believe that all of us are to blame. I believe that the rhetoric in America has become far too heated. But what we need to do is tone it down and look at our values. There has always been anti-Semitism. It is the world's oldest hatred. Luckily, thank God, we in America had a sanctuary and a refuge from it where it never really festered. After Pittsburgh, we have to look at it anew. I am calling on the President of the United States, who has shown unparalleled friendship to Israel, the Jewish state, to give a primetime address where he utterly repudiates and once and for all condemns. He's done it before, but he's done it sporadically and not as part of a primetime address.
Okay.
The white nationalists, bigots, neo-Nazi, these monsters, the president should absolutely do that. And rather than condemning him, and God, I've seen Jews call him Hitler, and Jews who support him recently, they're called capos. Rather than engage in such extremist, hate-filled language, call on the president to do the right thing. In the same way that he said that anyone who wants to harm the Jews and destroy them, he will destroy them first, which was quite an important thing for a non-Jewish leader of a non-Jewish state to say. He must go further and totally condemn neo-Nazis.
Okay, I want to let Elad respond to that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that, unfortunately, I feel like much of the pro-Israel world, which I align myself with, I, led a crowdfunding campaign to put an ad in the New York Times to call them out for not reporting enough on terror attacks in Israel. And I really feel like what this is about is not about extremism. It's not about the extremism of the people who dare to call out extremism, but actually about having a substantive discussion about these issues. Whenever I hear Rabbi Boteach talk, he's never talking about the actual substance of the white nationalist rhetoric itself, as opposed to the white nationalist movement, the most extreme elements of the white nationalist movement. Just yesterday, Donald Trump repeated the conspiracy theory that George Soros funded the caravan to come to America. In other words, 4 days after the horrific massacre that happened in Pittsburgh, the President of the United States repeated the exact thinking of the shooter. This is something, if we're going to talk about unity, and if we're going to talk about fighting white nationalism, we cannot talk about it only when it comes to the extremes, because unfortunately, the way extremism gets spread is when the people in the mainstream are not willing to confront the talking points and the rhetoric that surround them. We've seen this in other countries. We've seen this in Middle Eastern countries. We see this in the Palestinian world. If leaders cannot call out not just the extremists, but call out the rhetoric that leads to extremism, and God forbid if they are repeating the exact rhetoric that leads to Jewish deaths and to other deaths, then we have failed in actually fighting white nationalism. Fighting white nationalism doesn't mean just calling out neo-Nazis. It means calling out the words of neo-Nazis that have been spread, sadly, in very mainstream outlets.
Okay, let's let the rabbi respond. Let's let the rabbi respond.
That's fine. Sure.
Let me be clear. Condemning extremism and fanaticism while sounding like one yourself is not helpful. It pours gasoline on the fire. Saying that evangelical Christians who support Israel are anti-Semites, and even their support for Israel is anti-Semitic, attacking the entire right, as Elad, you wrote that people on the right actually created this monster from Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, that's extremist rhetoric, and it's unhelpful. We have all contributed in the United States to a climate of heated rhetoric. There's nothing wrong with two parties. I don't want to live in China. I don't want to live in Russia. I like a two-party state. Thank God Israel's a democracy. America's a democracy. The problem is extremist partisanship. This killer in Pittsburgh actually condemned Trump for being too close to the K's. I don't want to say the word. I'm not here to defend Trump. Trump failed in Charlottesville. I wonder if Elad will say one word about any failures, for example, of President Obama's part in legitimizing Iran and their genocidal rhetoric against the Jewish people by not condemning it while the United States negotiated with them for 2 years and then gave them $150 billion. I don't blame President Obama. I don't even blame people on the left, the Israeli left, who sometimes get a little bit too close to pro-BDS forces.
Rabbi?
It's not their fault. We have to stop the extremist rhetoric and stop hating each other. For God's sake, stop the hatred.
Okay, Elad, I have to give you 30 seconds to wrap it up really quickly.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is not about extremism. It's not about how I'm a crazy extremist. I think that, honestly, it's very sad to be speaking to a rabbi who's accusing other Jews who really what we're trying to do is save Jewish lives. Right now, there is a rhetoric that is so heated and so dangerous that, again, is being repeated by Trump. I'm going to say that over and over again. Until we actually face the rhetoric